Good. How do I look, Patrick? Patrick is the director, or sat with the director in the truck, just to let you know. The truck is where we're recording this on tape, and he's giving me directions in my ear. So he's just telling me now whether the lip balm has done the job or whether I still look like I've just walked off a whole day on the ski slopes. Am I okay? Good. Okay. Good. So are we set to go? Tapes rolling? Yeah? Okay. Good. Whatever you say. Whatever you say. Good.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody, to this special CNBC debate. Now, things are looking up for the global economy. If you believe the best estimates of the economists, we might see 4% growth in 2011. But that may not be without some volatility. So, as fears of double-dip recession recede, what exactly are those other issues that business leaders need to be worried about? What is going to keep CEOs and political leaders awake at night? Well, fortunately, for the purposes of our discussion, we have 6 business leaders on our stage who've come from different industries and different parts of the world. Let me introduce our panel to you. Paul Bulcke is the CEO of Nestlé. Chanda Kochhar is the CEO and Managing Director of ICICI Bank in India. Yorihiko Kojima is Chairman of the Board at Mitsubishi Corporation of Japan. Ellen Kullman is Chair of the Board and CEO of DuPont from the United States. Jacob Wallenberg is the Chairman of Investor. And Captain Wei Jiafu is Group President and CEO of China Ocean Shipping Group. So, our panel, let's talk about the opportunities for growth for 2011. 4% would be a remarkable recovery if sustained. But if we're going to see that kind of number delivered for the planet as a whole, the United States needs to turn up this year. But as we know from the State of the Union address, there are a number of headwinds with regard to the US economic growth outlook. So, Ellen, let me start with you. As our panelist from the United States, how good or otherwise are you feeling about the strength of recovery in your home market?
Jeff, that's been a topic of great debate this week. There have been great stories of optimism and great questions that have come up. From my experience and what we see as we look at the United States is we've seen slow sequential improvement coming out of 2009 and through 2010. And the fourth quarter, I think, was a reinforcement that that improvement continues. There were a lot of questions about whether the end of 2010 would fall off. There'd be destocking or people lack confidence and would pull back, and that did not occur. So as we take a look at 2011, there is optimism for the automotive industry in the United States. It will grow high single digits. There's optimism around new production capability that's coming in alternate energy and in new technologies where innovation and science are really changing the game. At the end of the day, in the United States, it's going to come down to jobs, and that'll bring the confidence of that.
I'm really pleased that you brought up jobs here, because I am confused about whether there is such a thing as a jobless recovery and whether that can be achieved. We have 20% youth unemployment in the US. It's 20% in my home country, the UK. It's 40%, as we know, in Spain. And this is a very serious issue for the globe going forward. If we are going to get the planet's economy firing on all cylinders, then we need to start re-engaging labour. Can I bring in one of my other panellists, perhaps, to pick up on this point? Paul?
Well, first of all, there is optimism in general. You see the world has been growing 4 to 5% last year, and that's in quite a big contrast with the Davos last year and the year before. You may remember in 2009 it was shock waves. We were talking in terms of survival. Are we going to survive that? Last year it was about, who is the bad guy then the good guy, and we have to regulate. And this year there's basically an optimism of saying, well, look, we didn't fall off the cliff. and there is growth worldwide, and the emerging markets have emerged, and they're there very much active, and worldwide. And if you see it in perspective, worldwide, there are many, many jobs created. 5% growth worldwide is an amazing amount of jobs. The problem is, if you live in Western Europe, you say it's the wrong place. It should be here. And it's true that the debt crisis in Western Europe or also in the United States is conditioning the whole discussion. And we are saying, how are we going to save ourselves to glory? And that's maybe the wrong thing. You have to really go for debt, and how are you going to handle that? We have to start thinking again, how are we going to grow to glory? And growth is linked in with employment. And so I think
Okay, Paul, we know many of those things are true. So what is Nestlé going to do this year? If I can just put you on the spot for the moment,
all right.
What are you going to do in real terms to add workers back into your operations around the world?
Well, around the world, again, we have the developing emerging markets, and there we're growing very nicely too. But we're also growing in the Western world. Western Europe, we have growth because there's so many opportunities. You look at the aging population related to what our activity is.
I'm listening, but I'm not hearing. What are you going to do at Nestlé this year to put workers back to work?
Seeing the opportunities in every part of the world, in the Western Europe and the Western world too.
I know you're in a closed period, and you made that clear to me earlier, so I don't want to make this about how the stock's going to perform. But I'm just naturally interested in, is it an apprenticeship program, is it a job skill program, or is it just filling some spaces that have now become available because growth has returned?
It's looking for growth, also in Western Europe. It's looking for opportunities. It's looking for more productivity in our factories, and we can do that. We are creating jobs in Europe. We're not laying off, and we have products, new concepts like Dolce Gusto, which is bringing big growth for our company in Europe. We have Nespresso. We have so many ideas. Aging population is creating an amazing amount of opportunities also for the Western world.
Okay.
I do believe we have to think about productivity in Western Europe, so that jobs can be created.
Jacob.
If I could lift the question just for a second, what impressed me so much about this meeting was Prime Minister Cameron's speech, which was the kind of speech I'd love to see more politicians perform. He very strongly put the case of European growth forward, what he was willing to do in the UK, and what I liked about it was that he put his own neck on the line.
Let's come back to the UK and let's come back to Europe in a moment. Global growth. Is the US going to participate? Are we going to see a hard landing from the emerging world this year? Let's do the headlines, then we'll get down into the detail.
Well, I think obviously the United States were all hoping that the early signs of economic growth is going to continue, but on the other side, that's the risk. Is it going to be there or not? Yeah. Europe, you have the whole debt issue, the whole market issue. Are markets comfortable about all the measures that are being taken? And here I think that President Sarkozy and Angela Merkel, their very strong view on the euro, really put markets at ease, put me at ease, and created stability so we can move forward.
Okay, so it's confidence about a whole load of issues which is going to help us achieve that growth. Captain Wei, what role is China going to play in delivering the growth for the planet this year? Because we're all starting to worry about your domestic property market, and I think we're all concerned that the Chinese government is tightening monetary policy. Will China have a hard landing this year?
I need to say from first, generally speaking, the world economy is on clear track of recovery, and the trend will continue in year 2011. And in China, the Chinese government issued the 12th five-year plan. It's very clear to mention that we will keep the Chinese economy a sustainable and continuous growth in the next 5 years. And they transformation, the economic growth mode, that's very good for keep the Chinese economy growth healthily and sustainable. For example, before we used the three drivers, the investment, exporting, and consumer. But the two leg is longer. One leg is short, that's the consumer. And according to the 12th five-year plan, we will change the growth mode from the focus on growth then change to transform to focus on economic development. And their work continues to stimulate the domestic demand. That will be help the Chinese economy find a new force and also give a lot of opportunity for foreign investors to gather in China to share the Chinese bonus.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I bring you in to talk on the Indian angle to this as well? Is India going to deliver for the world this year as well on the growth side?
Indeed, India is going to deliver for itself and for the world, because India is going to be one of the economies that is growing at upwards of 8.5%. And that provides opportunity to not just companies within India, but actually to companies in other countries as well to come and share in the growing market in India. And there are actually two clear fundamental factors that are driving India's growth. One is the basic domestic consumption, which is a very, very strong driver of India's growth, which is coming out of the demographic dividend that we have. And the second driver of growth is the investment in infrastructure. And that is a driver because India has so far not invested enough in infrastructure. And everything that we now invest in infrastructure is actually coming out of the genuine need to invest. And therefore, there is a huge demand for these infrastructure projects and the services arising from these infrastructure projects as they come in. So again, India is not pushing investments just to drive economic growth. India is actually creating viable investments. And these are the two parts that are going to drive.
So very quickly, everybody on the panel thinks that growth will be better in 2011 than in 2010. Is that right? Is that a fair assumption?
I agree with that.
Growth will be positive in 2011. 2010 was a fantastic year for growth. You know, with the world economies, it's going to meter down. It'll be at 4%, not as great as it was, but it'll be positive.
Good. Let's take this to the audience. Put your hand up if you'd like to get involved in the conversation here. Good. Let me come to you, sir. What's your name?
My name is Chengal Reddy. I represent the Indian farmers. My question to the corporates is very simple. Your Western economies are based basically on industrial and service sectors. My own country, India, claims that is a great development in service and industrial sector. But 30,000 farmers commit suicide in my country. And the investment, the growth in my country in agriculture is not even 1% in the last 20 years. And most of the countries where you are all working, including DuPonts and Nestlé and all that, have you taken farmers as a part of your investments, developments, or do you simply see these small and underprivileged farmers as simply customers? Because without farmers, without their involvement in our communities, where 60% are dependent on agriculture, do you foresee growth and development without farmers' involvement?
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the question, sir. Anybody like to take this on the panel? Yeah, Ellen.
Yeah, I think the farming community is absolutely critical for feeding the world. With the world population growing from, 7 billion will cross this year to over 9 billion in 2050. 17 companies and the WEF have partnered on a new vision for agriculture. And it is about biosecurity. It is about economically driven farming as a business, moving farmers from subsistence farming to generating an income where they can educate their children and save. And it is about doing it in a sustainable environmental way. And there are many projects in India, in Tanzania, and we started one in Vietnam, of public-private partnerships really executing and driving that. But we believe that for food security and for the nutrition needs of the world, getting a growing and more productive farming economy in India, in sub-Saharan Africa, in China, is a critically important part of that.
I'll come back to this because I do want to spend more time talking about the food price story, but I don't want us to get lost in the discussion and this to end up being like herding cats. So Kojima-san, can I ask you, Japan has been lost for 2 decades. We saw a debt downgrade from S&P. Just tell us what Japan, the world's second largest, or is it the third largest economy now, is going to add this year?
Okay, as far as the Japanese economy is concerned, I don't worry so much about, frankly speaking. And rate down, it's a bit surprising. But as you may know, Japanese government quite recently, announced some policy or the financial policy to encourage the Japanese economy. in terms of the taxation and so forth. And as you may know, say, Prime Minister Mr. Khan came here, and yesterday he made a speech, and he announced this new policy. And this will be very much encouraging for the Japanese economy. In the meantime, say, we are involved in the business in Japan. We ourselves are very much optimistic for the Japanese economy.
Okay,
because,
great. Let me just finish you there. Okay. If you're optimistic for the Japanese economy, I'll take Mitsubishi's word as it stands. Thank you very much indeed for that. We need to move this conversation on. We're going to pick up on the issue of Eurozone debt and the crisis in Europe when we come back. Stay with us. Remember my boss, okay?
We didn't know we had a commercial break.
I'm working hard here, you can see. Are you paid? Are you paid? Are you paid? You know how bad the media industry is at the moment? God. No, thank you for the point. Good. Are we okay?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back, everybody. Let's talk about Europe's debt crisis now and what potential risks that brings to the recovery for this year. Let's talk a little bit about whether it's been well managed and whether it will be ultimately successfully resolved in 2011. Jacob, let me start with you, if I might. You probably know as much about the intricacies of the banking and sovereign debt crisis as anybody here on the panel. Are you confident, from what you've heard over recent weeks now, that Europe's leaders are finally speaking with one voice and heading together in the same direction?
Yes. I'm really comfortable with what's been coming through here. Greece took a while, Portugal, Ireland moved quicker, and here in Davos we've heard the very strong language of Sarkozy and Merkel, being the two leaders of the Eurozone and having to take the leadership. Now, having said that, I think the individual countries and politicians in those countries have shown great courage. I think they have a Herculean task to take on all these changes in such a rapid fashion. But they are doing it, and I'm very comfortable that they will come through.
One of the problems, it seemed to me, while I've been listening to the comments made, is that the political leaders are very keen to express confidence, and they are talking about solutions. But I hear a certain amount of nervousness from the business community about committing investment to Europe while there still isn't resolution of this story. Can I ask someone else to pick up in the panel and just talk about whether they feel confident putting money to work back in Europe? Surveys at the moment are suggesting Europe isn't even on the list of the top 5. It starts with China, it ends with Brazil or India, the USA is in there somewhere as well, but Europe just doesn't figure right now.
Well, you have, in my eyes, you have two dimensions to it. First of all is taking the panic out. So you really, and that is what basically has been done now. There's a real commitment, they want to show leadership, say, stay cool. Now, that's the first step. That's a necessary step, but now you have to start restructuring certain dimensions. I think one of the biggest problems in Europe is that you have so many differences in Europe in financial policies, and also the debt dimension of Europe is still something that is there. If you live too long above your means, somewhere something has to be paid. That has to be paid. So you can push it forward, you can restructure it, you can give it more a time dimension, but then you have to do the restructuring of your financial structure in general. Your deficit, you have to take it out. How do you take deficits out over time? And not only by reducing cost, which is already a very difficult thing politically, but also by creating growth again. Now that debt is just going to be a burden on growth. So this is a dilemma that still has to be sorted out. And how the governments are going to do that, framing an environment that allows that investment to flow back. So there are still many, many issues. And then the discipline, the political discipline. Let's face it, these are long-term dimensions. Now politics, actually in our society, starts to be the shortest-term thinkers. In 4 years' time, they have to be re-elected. To a certain extent, companies are having longer-term views on things than politicians. How that is going to be orchestrated again, how the international institutions who have to govern certain things. We are speaking of the G20, but then the G20 in number could be okay. Yeah. What is the agenda? Yeah. How that is all going to be worked out is still something to be done. But I must say the first condition of we want to, some more leadership, political leadership, is pronounced. We saw that reconfirmed this week. Very important. Now we have then, with all stakeholders, to start working on these issues. And I think in Europe it is definitely, again, to give a little bit of a spirit of positivism and start also on the productivity issue. We have to be more productive again.
Okay, well let's run this along the path. Yes, Kojima-san, you wanted to pick up on that?
As far as the, say, Europe market is concerned, we are these days, say, so-called not a trading company, investment company. And there are so many business investment opportunity in Europe these days. And this is mostly renewable energy business and also consumer business there. And therefore, there are so many business opportunities. Besides, Japanese yen is getting stronger. It is also good for chance for us to invest. Therefore, I do expect, say, Europe economy is going up.
Well, that's very encouraging. You raise a fascinating issue, which is the one of the currency. And we might talk currency wars later on, but just for the moment, what we've seen is a great deal of volatility in the euro as the markets have responded to each stop-go segment of this crisis. For you all as business people, currency volatility makes investment decisions difficult. Captain Wei, I wonder if I can just bring your perspective in here. From the Chinese point of view, is it any concern at all that there doesn't seem to be some kind of stability around the single currency?
About this issue, my opinion is that the heavily debt-developed economy will need to reduce their fiscal deficit. Eurozone is still a high-risk area for world economy in year 2011. A massive spread sovereign debt crisis will not be very probable. The risk of the total debt of the Western Europe will exceed that of Eastern Europe. The austerity and the deficit reduction will have a negative impact on economic growth.
It slightly concerns me to hear you single out Europe as that great risk issue for this year. But let's open this discussion to the panel, because I think we could usefully bring in some other points of views and some other questions related to this. And of course, in the UK, where I'm from, we're practicing this experiment in austerity at the moment, which is obviously going to have some impact on demand. Sir, your name and your question.
Claes Eklund, economist from Sweden. A question to the panel, based exactly on this discussion. You are business people, and I find your optimism encouraging. You look for growth in investments. But during this week, during all the seminars that I've gone through with all the pundits, the professors, the analysts, the economists, etc., they've been more apprehensive because they talk a lot about debts, including austerity problems, including the euro, currency tensions, etc. So my question to you is, are they too pessimistic or are you too optimistic?
Thank you for that. Who would like to take this one first? Jacob. Yeah, come on in.
I very much agree with the learned economist from Sweden. I think maybe in a discussion like this it becomes a little bit too black or white. I think Professor Rubini in his opening statements at the beginning of the World Economic Forum, where he pointed to the question of, is the glass half full or half empty? I think most people agree with that we're on a nice path, but there are a number of impediments. We don't know how they're going to play out. But of course there are risks, be it Europe, be it the United States, the debt issue, the Japanese growth, currencies, China. Is China going to continue to grow, or are we going to see a real estate bubble, or are we going to see other problems appearing? So of course it's not that black or white. I'd call myself cautiously optimistic, but still a bit optimistic.
Captain Wei.
I agree with.
That's easy then. Ellen.
I don't think you'd be in the jobs that we're in if you're not naturally optimistic, but you have to be a realist at the same time. And part of our job is to integrate all of those uncertainties that Jacob talked about and understand what the best path is. And so it's naturally then that we're on the positive no matter, what is happening in the world. We have to be the integrator and then establish then the path.
I was fascinated by a survey I saw at the beginning of this week that suggested that over the course of the year, CEOs are tremendously optimistic. You take the 3-year view and suddenly the line goes flat. And it appears that the visibility over a 3-year view is somewhat lacking. But I don't want to interrupt your answers to his question. So who would like to comment?
I would say it's important for a business leader to look for optimism in the new opportunities and at the same time be grounded to reality in terms of being aware of the challenges. And I think that's what all of us are doing here. We are finding the next drivers of growth in each of our economies and across the world. But at the same time, it's not to say that we don't have to be cautious about the challenges. And in fact, I think what we have to realize is that today when the world is becoming multi-speed and when the world is becoming even more interconnected, I think the impact of the challenges is also going to be much larger. The developed world is going to see other challenges in the form of unemployment, in the form of sovereign debt, whereas the emerging or the emerged economies are going to have to tackle inflation, food security, and so on. Over and above that, since the world is interconnected, anything that happens to energy prices in the developed world is going to impact the developing economy. Anything that's going to happen to growth in one part of the world is going to impact capital flows elsewhere. So I think these are realities of life. But, to come back to your question, as CEOs, while we keep these realities in mind, we also see where we can take our organizations and in the bargain take our countries.
Very quickly, Paul?
Yes, very quickly. I do feel politicians, depending from where they're coming from, are less optimistic than businessmen. There's one underlying thing. It depends on your perspective. You're a worldwide company. 80% of the world population is going for a better tomorrow. And what I see is the emerging markets or have emerged. They're really part of the scene now. And what you see is something positive. They really go about their own markets. They really go about their own future. So there's something fundamentally changed in the world. The developing countries before was, in my eyes, a classification of the Western world, saying we are developed and the rest is developing. And basically developing means they try to step in our footsteps and they try to catch up. What we do see now is that the developing markets, the emerging markets, they're going about their future on their own terms. They have 80% of the population. And that has then the uncertainties on food security, pressure on prices, lots of uncertainties. But definitely there is something underlying, a pride. You see a pride, you see an independence. They're really part of the scene now, and that's good. So, and that's something that the Western world then sees totally different. We're not so optimistic. So there is optimism, cautiously optimistic. I would say we are optimistic, but we're afraid to be optimistic.
Okay. Let's wrap that just there for the moment. I'm going to take some more questions from the floor.
Thank you, Jeff. Sam DiPiazza. When you talked about the jobless issue in the U.S., the jobless recovery, a lot of people would say that that's because the U.S. has had extraordinary productivity gains in the last year. Lots of growth, but no jobs because of productivity. Europe, on the other hand, has not had that same productivity growth. And in fact, if you get growth in Europe, you may not have jobs for a long time to come. So really 2 questions. In the U.S., when will the jobs start coming back, i.e. productivity begin to level off? And in Europe, do we have a long time to work back to productivity?
Thank you very much for the question. Do I see a hand? Ellen.
In the United States, in my experience, the number of recessions in the last 30 years that I've experienced, jobs always lag, economic growth. So coming out of a recession, jobs do lag. We have had and been focused on a lot of productivity in the United States, and so I think you're absolutely correct. The opportunity in the U.S. around jobs is going to come around transitions in technology. It's going to come around transitions to new and alternate energies. It's going to come around transitions on what biotechnology and new sciences can bring to a wide range of industries. That's the areas where I believe that you are going to see an increase in jobs. That's going to take a different kind of training, a different kind of education. But the U.S. government's been focused on green jobs as in their stimulus package and coming out of the recovery. Europe is different. Europe has those same opportunities. There's been a lot of investment in alternate energy, in photovoltaics, and in wind. And we see the new materials and the new areas of opportunity in growth and employment will come from these technology transitions.
Kojima-san.
Yes. And as you may know, we have 200 offices in 90 countries. Therefore, we got the global information, very timely.
Can I just come up and...
Okay.
Your microphone is
something
scratching against... Could I know... Okay. If you would mind. I just need to adjust your clothing.
Well, under such circumstances...
So, can I just ask you to start that answer again?
Okay.
Please, thank you.
As you may know, our company has 200 offices in 90 countries almost throughout the world. Therefore, we got very much updated information globally. Therefore, we are analyzing the global economies, region by region. And in that sense, United States is now recovering, but it may take some more time. And but they announced the so-called infrastructure business. We are very much prepared to work with the United States for the infrastructure and the kind of railway, Shinkansen, or nuclear power plant, or so many other infrastructure business. This will contribute to the employment, of course. And but it may take some more time. But as I told you, even in EU, we have so many investment business there. Besides, and we have a strategy for the investment. China, India, Brazil. And we are, analyzing the whole marketing. Therefore, in that sense, I myself is rather optimistic for the investment in global economy.
Okay, good. Let me just dash over here. We've got another question. Let's give it to you, sir.
Jeff Drazen from the New England Journal of Medicine.
Hang on a second. Let's just... have you got the shot?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right.
Jeff Drazen from the New England Journal of Medicine. For many economies around the world, the health sector has been a stone that's been pulling it back. And in Europe, in the UK, in the US, we've been trying to deal with that. We haven't really heard from India and China. How are you going to be dealing with the health sector as your workforce is going to be beginning to demand health care that it hasn't had in the past?
Thank you very much indeed for that. Anybody like to? Yes.
Yeah. I think, provision of basic facilities like healthcare or primary education or vocational training. I would say all three are very imperative, at least for a country like India, to make sure that we provide all these facilities, not just to take care of the people, but in a way to actually make our demographic dividend work. Because while on the one hand, it's very good to feel that every year we add 12 million people to the working age group, and that's going to provide the consumption power. But if these people do not have their basic health care, or if they are not educated, and for that matter, if they are not skilled to start an employment or get into employment, then clearly there will be no demographic dividend to reap. So clearly this is something that we really need to work on. In a way, it is also a huge business opportunity for the sets of companies that are engaged in this field. I would think the whole approach here is a multiplicity of approach. One is to provide these facilities to those people who cannot afford it through government machinery and so on. Second is to make advanced levels of these facilities available for those who can afford it, who can improve their standard of living in various manners. And the third is not just to rely on saying either it's going to be government that is going to provide the basic facilities, or it's going to be the private sector that's going to see it as a business opportunity and move, but clearly create a public-private partnership so that the entire ecosystem moves in a manner that is able to cope up with the requirements that these countries are actually creating for these basic
So
facilities.
we have to move on in the conversation, but we'll see if we can get time to come back to this. But very briefly, what we've really been talking about in this first half hour is going for growth, which the United States is still doing, it appears to me, or facing down the debt crisis, dealing with the deficit, and embracing austerity for our people. My sense from our CEOs, I know it's a very crude way of differentiating the policy approaches, but my sense from our CEOs is that you prefer the going for growth model at this point rather than the austerity one, which is going to leave people perhaps unemployed for longer periods and investment more challenging and basically your business models a little compromised in those parts of the market. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but would that be a fair assessment? Anybody disagree with how I've characterized your views?
Yes, I think the U.S. economy is showing sign of stable recovery. Last December, U.S. unemployment rate dropped to a 5-month low to 9.9%. And the growth rate of U.S. manufacturing index has reached a 7-month high. IMF has just adjusted its 2011 global economic forecast to 4.4%. So IMF forecast for emerging economic growth is 6.5%.
Yeah.
Developed economic growth will reach 2.5%. So according to IMF, U.S. economy will grow by 3%, and Japan will grow by 1.6%. These new projections are all higher than the number released from last October. So I say it's a good opportunity. Why the CEO always optimistic to the world? Because we have ability to find the problem, then find the solution to reach the goal. So for U.S. jobless, I give the solution for that. Immediately lift the ban to exporting the high technology goods to China and to everywhere. Well, why this time President Hu Jintao to head the direction buy $25 billion project? Sell more to China. China to stimulate to domestic economy needs to buy more goods, import more goods. It's a good opportunity for us. And for health,
Captain
China...
Wei, can we just stop you at that?
Okay.
Good opportunity for the United States. I have a feeling we could have lost the second half of the program to you. But thank you so much for that. Okay, we need to take a swift break. We'll be back in just a moment. When we come back, there is one tax on growth we need to talk about, and that's higher commodity prices, and particularly where higher food prices are hurting some of the world's poorer communities. We'll be right back.
Me?
Yeah.
Moving too much, so okay.
Yeah, okay.
These are short breaks.
So let's talk about food price inflation and also the rising cost of commodities. Let's get to our panel. Let's just address the broader issue of higher commodity prices at this point. Okay, from a business perspective, there are always issues related to inventories, to speculative demand in the marketplace, but we've had a consistently strong record of rising prices now for some years, which perhaps indicates that the trend will be higher for some time to come. As business people, firstly, do you believe that the prices are responding directly to demand? And secondly, how is it affecting the decisions that you're making as CEOs, and how will it affect those decisions in 2011? Paul?
Well, look, you have two dimensions to this. First of all, we see an underlying trend of raw material prices coming up, especially food prices. You have to say that in the context of history. It went also down a long, long time. And so the underlying trend is in our eyes, upwards, reasonably upwards, although you see then this volatility. And that's a problem. You have to see, it is always linked to the market. And I don't believe you have to regulate too much in there, but it is perception. And the perception is linked with, first of all, the underlying supply gap that you get, because the demand is projected to be higher. 80% of the population of the world is eating more and better. That's good. If you then have the supply side not matching up to that, and that is linked in with many, many other issues, that underlying long-term issues like the agriculture policies, the free trade that is having a burden. You see the whole discussion about biofuel that is totally wrong in the figures. If you just think about how you talk about 10% of the fuel should be biofuel, then you have to triple the agriculture production in the world. All these issues have to be put in perspective again, and I do believe if we are optimistic, but cautiously optimistic, that's one of these dimensions that really, one of the dark clouds is, are we really tackling these underlying issues? We, as a company, are definitely linked with that dimension. How do you handle that? Well, you have to see the underlying trends. You don't price on the volatility. You cannot do that. But also you invest yourself as a company upstream with farmers and all. That's why we are with this new agenda for agriculture policy in the future, linked with that. We have to, with a multi-stakeholder approach, going to these issues. You just think about the fact that 1.5% of R&D in the world is dedicated to agriculture. You just think about agriculture per se is the biggest development driver in the world, the cheapest. It's the best return on investment is agriculture. And so there's many issues that we really have to put in perspective again in the world. And that's coming back to the question from the person of India, that agriculture is by far not high enough on the agenda, I think, of the world. And it has to come back. Because so much people is involved. If you think 70-80% of the people working is in agriculture, and that food prices are going up because of, I feel, supply shortage.
Okay, let's run along the panel. Who else would like to come in? Alan?
You know, Paul's absolutely right about it comes down to the fact that we make our decisions based on the long-term trends, not short-term volatility, but we have to have the mechanisms to deal with the short-term volatility. So, you know, agriculture cycles, you know, industry cycles, there are cycles that come into this. But fundamentally, with the increasing of the middle class, as he said, with more people being fed better, there's an input issue into this, and that we are not growing enough grains, we are not growing enough food in the world to feed that growing population. And agricultural productivity is absolutely key. It's going to take investment in infrastructure. It's going to take investment in modern agronomic techniques and traits, and in frameworks, country by country, and accepting of new technology to get that productivity. And so there is a lot of opportunity there, and there's a lot of work being done. It is about execution at the end of the day. We've got to stop talking about it and start doing it.
Kojima-san.
Yeah, talking about this, say, price rise of the commodities or agricultural products is we have to analyze the reasons. Number one reason is the supply and the demand situations. Number two is the derivative money. Number three is the climate change. That is also very important. And under such circumstances, as already mentioned, the important thing is the so-called R&D. Research and development for the agricultural industry is very, very important. And this is number one. And also, say, this climate change is the clean energy or environmental problems. We have to analyze how to, say, analyze this climate change. And talking about the Australia, West Coast is very dry right now. East Coast is a very heavy rainfall. Everywhere, these kind of things are now happening. This is related to the, resource costs.
So I seem to be getting a consensus from the panel that prices will continue to rise through this year. Does anybody have a different view? If not, then I will move on and I will ask what...
I would not say that the prices are going to rise. They have doubled in certain areas.
Yeah.
That's the volatility. You see the underlying trend, so right. That's what we have to look at, so the perspective of it. And,
so my question then is about what responsibilities you as business leaders have to communities this year where the percentage of their daily income is significantly higher going into food than it is in the Western developed world. And consequently, the impact on those households is significantly greater. Is this something that CEOs don't have to worry about because they're focused on shareholder return, profit for their investors, and so on and so forth? No. Or is there something that each of you will intend to do this year where you feel you may be able to make a difference on this story?
Look, this has to do with some fundamental question also about companies and society at large. If you say, well, we don't care, we do care, in the sense that we are part of society. If you have that, it doesn't create a positive environment where companies can flourish. As such, we as a company, for example, or as companies are putting the right points and the right agenda points, and we are sitting here discussing these things, trying to put these things on the agenda. If we talk about water and the impact of water and food, if we talk about no food for fuel, And these things, these are just giving messages, being part of a global societal discussion on certain topics. Long term, you say today the prices are too high, what do you do there? Well, there again is seeing the underlying trends. We don't price, you cannot price your products on the volatility of your price from the input prices. So you really go about ways of reducing the impact of these volatilities, of these price increases. You really induce and help to create productivity up front. And so, for example, we are working with 600,000 farmers. And we have millions of farmers through our suppliers. And we have agronomes working to increase productivity and all. But yet, this is one company. But by multiplying effect, that's why we have this new view on agriculture policy for the future. Many other companies involved, 350 stakeholders were in the base of that document that you can find here. This is also one step, but it is a step.
Okay. Jacob?
I think, broadly speaking, I'm not personally involved in the food business. But broadly speaking, talking about corporate social responsibility, I mean the responsibility of corporates in a social context, I think we passed that point, and I think we passed it quite a while ago. We all understand and believe that we have to be part of that. We have to make intelligent decisions. We have to participate in the debate, whether it be here in Davos or elsewhere. And because if we don't, at the end of the day, I think the judgment by the ultimate consumer is going to be very clear. They're going to vote with their feet and they're going to go elsewhere. So I think we come to accept that, and we want to engage, and we have a responsibility.
But we still have no resolution of the Doha round. We have a G20 that doesn't seem to be able to make significant decisions on a host of things, and yet we continue to see food riots around the world. And I understand what you're saying about CSR. That's yesterday's conversation for the corporate world. I agree with you. But we're talking about 2011 and what you can do, each of you, practically on this issue, and whether you are thinking about them at board level, and whether you are thinking about specific objectives, policies, goals that you intend to roll out through 2011. That's what I'm looking for here.
I'm on the board of the Coca-Cola company, and without dwelling on the individual details, it is so clear from that board work and from the sort of spine of the company, the attitude, that the engagement in questions of this nature, most importantly the question of water, throughout the world, is hugely important to the company. They pour a lot of resources and engagement into that. I can't give you the numbers, but I can certainly vouch for the seriousness of the effort.
Okay. Ellen?
It is, if you have a large portion of your business in agriculture like we do, and agriculture is a local business, you're working country by country. And our people in each one of those countries are very active in their communities and really want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to advance not only that sector, the agriculture sector, but their neighbors and their friends are the ones that are having the impacts of this. And so we see that very clearly because of the local nature of the agriculture business. And we work very closely with social service agencies around the world in order to do what we can to help. But it is a long-term issue, and we can't forget that we have to continue to make that progress every year on productivity so that that volatility dampens over time, so that the supplies meet the demands and you get more into a balanced situation.
One of the questions that's now on the table, I think, for us is, are the protests that we're seeing in North Africa related to this story, or is there something else unfolding here at a political level? I want to talk about, as we come to the end of our program, known unknowns, the risk issues perhaps for 2011 as a whole here. I wonder if I could just ask our panelists to comment on what they think may be unfolding and how we should view it through the prism of the business community. Who would like to start us off? Captain Wei?
I think the inflation will also spread from the developing nation into the developed economy. The food price is the top factor of the inflation. Why? Because due to the abundant liquidity in the international market, so the price of commodity in year 2011 are estimated to stay high. So I suggest that all the governments need to control the liquidity. That will be control price. If let them go, printing more money, the price must go up. So the inflation, we CEO worry about that.
So you would encourage governments to pursue sort of pricing policies, perhaps to help subsidize the costs, or how do they address the inflation
If
problem?
a strong government, you need to consider the whole picture. If the food price going up fast, all the commodity price going up, the inflation will become. So tax and policy control.
So is this just a thinly veiled way of criticizing QE2 in the United States? Okay, but I don't want to get bogged down in that. Kojima-san.
And the important thing is, the World Economic Forum, the theme this year was shared norms for new reality. I think this is very good. Say, everybody throughout the world should discuss about this agricultural issues and so many issues. And therefore, in the COP16 held in Cancun, and the conclusion was not, say, so clearly made. But I think, including U.S. and China, everybody discussed about this, climate things. That kind of thing is very, very important from now on. And therefore, the theme of this World Economic Forum is very much contributing to this kind of problem in the world.
So it's good to have a forum to talk about these
That's
things.
right. And we ourselves are involved in the water business. Even these days, agricultural business throughout the world. Therefore, everybody should share the information together. That's very important.
So what is the known unknown as far as Mitsubishi is concerned this year? What's the one thing that might happen that would really cause you to rip up your business plan for 2011 and rewrite it?
Okay. We established a so-called business plan already. And this is the investment and the specific field and the specific regions. We have already made it. And say global information and the global economical situation, global environmental situation is very, very important to analyze the business chance the next year or year after.
Okay. Let's bring you in, Jacob.
To me, the most important question is maybe what President Obama brought forward in his State of the Union address, where you don't hear the U.S. president that often talking about the U.S. needing to be more competitive. He set the stage. We then saw Prime Minister Cameron basically say the same thing. The Western world needs to get to focus more, be more competitive, more R&D, and so on. But, as Cameron pointed to, we have to go from talking to delivering. We have to stop talking. Clinton said the same to young global leaders. Stop talking, start delivering. And I think this is key for all of us in the West. You pointed to a very important point here. Politicians today have 11 months to deliver on the Doha round. I think it is key for the future of the world, economic growth of the world, that we actually get our act together here. So those are some of the important things. And I would like to add a completely different perspective, very briefly. I went to one presentation on hyperconnectivity. What does it really mean when we're all connected? We saw, this is the new Medvedev plate. We saw how he brought this forward to the stage to show that he was connected, he was modern. And you see now how companies are starting to change organizational patterns. You go from the traditional hierarchical setup to working in teams. You look at sort of a different way of running your business. And politicians have a new way of being even more democratic in the sense of understanding what the broader general public feels about different issues. And this is coming forward very rapidly. We have to understand what it means for us in business and how we're going to utilize it.
Chanda, can I come to you? I mean, we've seen some protests in India related to food price inflation. Whatever the causes of unrest are in North Africa at this point, this story remains. Is that a key business risk in 2011, or do you see another known unknown, to borrow that phrase once again?
Well, in a way, the known unknown here is, how the prices of whether food, energy, other commodities would rise and be volatile. I think in that sense, that's a direct known unknown, which is going to impact the business models of all companies in the coming year. But beyond that, I think the bigger underlying factor here is to see that, it is imperative for all of us as companies and as countries to focus on saying that are we making our growth more inclusive? And, are we making sure that the business models that we follow allow more and more people to participate in the growth? And I think that's going to be imperative for the countries as well. And gone are the days whether it's just enough to say that some people will earn wealth and then they will redistribute. I think the model has to shift to the grassroots to say, can we create enough basic facilities plus employment generation opportunities for each and every of that small individual to be able to be capable of participating in growth and get an opportunity to participate in growth, because only when they participate in growth will the growth be inclusive, and that's, I think, the more better model of making growth more sustainable.
Ellen, so I want to come to you to wrap us up here, and it's if I can point you in a direction, it's really leadership again. Leadership in the business community, leadership politically, leadership globally. Right now, I don't know who really is in charge, and I think we ought to be finding that out at this point if we're going to address a lot of the problems that you've talked about here in this program.
If we sit here a year from now, I think the one thing that's sure is that we will be talking about a 2011 that's very different than the way we're thinking about it today. And I think the challenge for leadership, whether it's in government or in business or in NGOs or in the academic world, is to be able to really deal with the challenges real time. It is a very dynamic and a very fast-paced world, and the connectivity issue creates a momentum in a direction that sometimes cannot be predicted. And so it is about creating that resiliency, creating that ability to respond and react, and most important, to make progress. I think when people see progress made, people get hope. And at the end of the day, hope is a very large driver of the human race. And I think making sure that we continue to be in dialogue, making sure that we're continuing to put the real issues on the table is a very, very important part of continuing to make that progress.
And on the question of the coming together of the world, I mean, this phrase G0 has been doing the rounds here. Last year we talked about G2, I remember. And before that we spent a lot of time talking about G20. G0 doesn't fill me with hope. I hope you're right when you say next year we'll be talking about something completely different and we'll have got it all wrong as we sit here and talk about the world for 2011. But is G0, is that just a cynical way of viewing what's going on at the moment?
I think it is cynical. I see, when you have the heads of state in Europe come together and talk in great alignment about the future of the euro, and I think that there is tremendous understanding, tremendous communication, and I don't think that the G0 concept is one that I see as going forward is going to be the reality.
Okay, I'm afraid we've run out of time here for our conversation, but I want to thank you all very much indeed for leading us off in this discussion, and as always, you at home for watching, and we'll see you next time.